Hey folks, so in this video I'm going to get super nostalgic as I take you back to the Sonic cartoons of the early and also late 90s and try to discern which variant, if you will, was the best. I'm aware that there were Sonic cartoons made in the 2000s by the way, but these are outside my zone of interest, if you will. Should go out elsewhere for those. So there were three variants of cartoons based on Sonic the Hedgehog that were made in the 90s. One ran for more than one series, and are based on lore established in Sonic 1, 2, Sonic 3 and Knuckles. But each offers its own additional lore, resulting in contradicting interpretations of Mobius and the circumstances of Sonic and his friends. That, as well as contradicting each other, also contradicts the lore established in the British Sonic Bible, if you will, Stay Sonic. That I talked about in a video last year that I'll link below. So the first Sonic cartoon is called The Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, that was made in the early 90s around the time of Sonic 2, and depicts a psychedelic vision of Mobius that features Sonic, Tails, and Dr. Iro Robotnik, as you would expect. But also Robotnik's hench robots, if you will, Scratch, a dumb chicken robot resembling the Clucker badniks in the Ring Fortress zone in Sonic 2. Grounder, an also dim-witted robot but on treadmills with a drill nose, resembling those that jump out of the ground in the Aquatic Ruin Zone in Sonic 2. And Coconuts, a monkey robot resembling the tree badniks in the Emerald Hill Zone in Sonic 2 that has like a New York gangster accent. And despite being more switched on, is treated like a third wheel by Scratch, Grounder and Robotnik, and in one episode becomes a literal outcast. As well as a multitude of other quirky characters, including Wes Weasley the Dodgy Salesman, Sketch Lampoon, a pelican I guess, who gets locked up for Robotnik for drawing a comic where it takes the piss out of him. Robotnik in this, in my opinion, is the most remarkable of the three, as he's portrayed as a raving lunatic with delusions of grandeur, like he has a statue of himself outside his fortress. And is voiced by the late Long John Baldry, who talks in this outrageous English accent, and the episodes often end with Robotnik in a defeated position, saying his catchphrase, "I hate that hedgehog!" Robotnik isn't given any origin lore in this, as in Stay Sonic by the way. Like he's just Robotnik, though his Butch mother makes an appearance in some episodes. The overall tone of this first variant is easily the most comedic as well as quirky. The Hedgehog himself was voiced by Jaleel White, a black American child actor who had previous experience in a sitcom called Family Matters. And his attitude-filled voice became the definitive Sonic voice, and he returned to do the voice for the other two variants. Miles Tails Prower in this is voiced by Christopher Welch, and comes off as a slightly younger brother of Sonic and looks up to him. And I feel is similar to his depiction in the British Sonic novels that I also made a video on. I also feel they gave him a good backstory in the episode Tails' New Home, where after getting involved in one too many accidents with Scratch and Grounder, Sonic decides to find him a new home away from being a sidekick. And it's explained that Sonic found him abandoned and adopted him rather than they just ran into each other in Stay Sonic. Man, that's an emotional episode. A rare serious moment in this first variant of Sonic cartoon media. Now I'll say that each episode ends with a detached life lesson segment called Sonic Says, which was basic life lessons, including one where Sonic advises on how to deal with a paedophile. After one albeit huge series of adventures have ended, the Sonic variant that followed would show a very different vision of Mobius. It was simply known as Sonic the Hedgehog, but the fans would come to refer to it as Sonic SatAM because of its Saturday morning time slot, but also to better distinguish it from Adventures of. And strangely it premiered just a few weeks after Adventures of, with that being shown in the week and this on Saturdays. It had a much more complex premise and lore than Adventures of, The lore speaker being that the capital of Mobius, Mobotropolis, was voiced by King Acorn the Squirrel, who was given a top hammy performance by Tim Curry, you know, from Home Alone 2 and Rocky Horror. But Robotnik in this starts off as one of Acorn's top generals called Julian. And he and his wheezy little nephew Snivelly, and also an evil sorcerer called Ixis Norgus. And unbeknownst to Acorn, are working together to take him out of the picture and turn Mobotropolis into Robotropolis, an industrial fortress. Think Palpatine's rise to power in the Star Wars prequels, but a much shorter, simpler, kiddie version. Upon his takeover of Mobotropolis, Julian now declares himself Robotnik and sends Acorn into a vortex to the void, a prison zone, if you will, that Robotnik has created. This is akin to the psychedelic warps of confusion that are mentioned in Stage Sonic, as well as being the special stages in Sonic 1, although there's no mention of Chaos Emeralds in this cartoon. But Robotnik being a complete bastard, he also betrays Norgus by sending him into the void too. Robotnik in this, by the way, is voiced by a different guy called Jim Cummings, and is more menacing and sadistic than the Aventador version, with red eyes and a very deep voice. He also keeps a robot bird as a pet in this, like an early form of virtual pet. And his agenda is different too, as not only does he long to rule Mobius, but to heavily industrialise it too, and turn all of its animals into robot slaves to his machines. Upon the overthrowing of King Acorn, his daughter Princess Sally Alicia Acorn, who someone had described as a chipmunk on Wikipedia, which is clearly a squirrel and has been in multiple other Sonic media. Though this is the only version I know where she's a princess. Joins Sonic and his friends, who are collectively called the Freedom Fighters, and they all hide out in a village called Knothole, the whereabouts of which being unknown to Robotnik. As I said earlier, with Sonic himself, Jaleel White reprises the role, and is pretty much the same character here, though he does amusingly call Robotnik Robotnik in this. He also clearly has the hots for Sally, who usually rejects his advances, but does kiss him when he succeeds in a mission. It's noteworthy and low-key shocking that this is the only variant to feature the gold rings, by the way, that are referred to here as power rings, and just one will boost the user's speed. Tails is back, but he's voiced by Bradley Pierce, and is smaller and younger sounding here, more like a toddler here, who tends to be left behind when some of the others go to Robotropolis. The other fighters are Bunny Rabbit, a female rabbit with a Texan accent for some reason, who was half roboticized by Robotnik but escaped. Roboticized, by the way, is a term I've only heard used in this variant, referring to a process in which Robotnik turns animals into robots rather than badniks. Antoine Depardieu, who is a well-dressed coyote you may guess is French, is cowardly by nature and often needs rescuing by the others, and fancies Sally Acorn but is always outperformed by Sonic. Rotor, a walrus who is the local mechanic and inventor. Nicole, who isn't actually a living character but a portable computer that was gifted Sally by King Acorn, that she uses to hack Robotnik's computers when on missions. She has AI, so can have conversations with Sally and the others, so I'm counting her as a freedom fighter. There's also Uncle Chuck, or Sir Charles, Sonic's uncle, who was like a knight of the realm under King Acorn's administration, who invented the roboticizer before Robotnik stole it and used it against him. But after an initially hostile encounter, Sonic finds a de-roboticizer and is able to bring the real Chuck back from his subconscious, but not change his body back at all, so he serves the Freedom Fighters as a spy in Robotropolis. I thought this was a pretty cool idea. And finally Dolce, a female dragon with a voice similar to Bunny, who they adopt in the second series, who provides them with flight, funny enough. She really annoys me actually, definitely my least favourite character, and a dragon at that, a dragon in an industrial sci-fi setting. Though as I mentioned earlier, there's also the Goblin, Sorcerer and Norgus. In a time travel arc, they go back to King Acorn's fantasy kingdom. And in one episode, there's even a wizard who, in an act of revenge against Sonic, casts a slow spell on him. It's a surreal fusion of sci-fi and fantasy that seems to throw in everything but the kitchen sink in for the premise here. I find it noteworthy that though it's an American cartoon, apart from obviously Sonic and Tails, it doesn't feature any of the other friends from Stay Sonic / the British Sonic novels. Apart from Sally Acorn, who has pretty much the same personality, except that she's a princess here. But anyways, yeah, a lot more going on here than in Adventures of, both in lore and premise, and also the huge cast of characters. No spoilers here, but the final shot of the final episode is an evil pair of eyes in the dark. The writer later said that those were Norguses who would have replaced Robotnik as the main villain in the third series had it not been cancelled. Obviously the tone of SatAM contrasts with Adventures of. Though Sonic himself is the same, it's much more dark and serious. Though at the TV company's request, it features more humour in the second series, including a pretty funny skit in which Sonic and Antoine live together in a house. The final Sonic cartoon variant of the 90s, Sonic Underground, came a lot later than the others, 1989 actually. As the name suggests, it's another set in an industrial setting. And also like SatAM, Sonic and his friends are just one of multiple bands of rebels in a freedom fight against Robotnik and his SWAT boss. But otherwise, as with the other two, had a completely different premise and lore. So in this one, Sonic has a brother called Manic and a sister called Sonia. See what they did there? But none of the other freedom fighters from SatAM feature here. And weirdly, even Tails doesn't appear to exist in this timeline. But Janelle White returns to voice not only Sonic, but also both the siblings too, who is really working overtime for this one. His super high-pitched voice for Sonia often amuses me. Anyway, they're all part of a royal family and the offsprings of Queen Alina, who used to rule over Mobius, until Robotnik overthrew her and she went into exile. But on the advice of the Oracle of Delphius, she gave up her children to foster parents. This feels like earlier when I said how Julian Robotnik's rise to power in SatAM feels influenced by Star Wars. Well, this reminds me of Princess Leia separating the twins before A New Hope. This line from the theme song especially gives me Leia vibe.
I long for my children, but I have to wait. To act too soon could seal their fate.
When Sonic and his siblings grow up, the Oracle of Delphius reveals a prophecy to them. That they must now find their mother to form the Council of Four that will overthrow Robotnik. It gives them each medallions that can be used as laser guns but can also change into musical instruments. An electric guitar for Sonic, keyboards for Sonia, and drums for Manic to play in their underground band Sonic Underground. Wait, what? In the middle of each episode, the band play a corny song that usually relates to the episode. I didn't care for these at all. So at this point I'm going to change the subject to Robotnik. In this incarnation his voice actor has changed again to Gary Chalk, who surprisingly voiced Grounder in Adventures of, who gives a more middle of the road voiceover here in my opinion. Like not as deep and overtly evil as in SatAM, but not demented as in Adventures of, like it's okay. Upon his takeover of Mobius, the circumstances of which seemed a lot vaguer to me than in SatAM. He has SWAT bots constructed as in SatAM, but he threatens aristocrat animals into paying him so he can give a cut to Dingo and Sleep, the two bounty hunters he employs upon completion of their missions. The voice of Sleep stood out to me, and in fact both of them were voiced by Maurice LeMarche, who voiced Brain in Pinky and the Brain in the Animaniacs cartoon, which I can definitely hear in his sleazy tone. Unlike the other variants, I admit that I haven't actually seen all of this series, but a fraction of the episodes that I've been collecting on DVDs, as was the only means I had of watching it. But to be honest, I saw nothing remarkable, apart from an appearance by Knuckles in the episode Friend or Foe. Yes, Knuckles here is in this, but not Tails, where he's in a similar role to Sonic 3, so the Guardian of Chaos Emerald, but a bit gullible. This episode was the only one that gave my full attention, to be honest. So now it's time for me to compare and contrast these three variants and decide which is the best. To start, I'm going to talk about the actual animation styles and qualities of each. For a renters of, as I said about it earlier, the animation is quirky and kind of psychedelic. The SSSSS squad are all funny looking to match the Daft's voices. Dr. Robotnik is ludicrously grotesque, but the backgrounds of the scenes often look quite basic. But it does suit the comic tone of that variant. As for SatAM and its more serious tone, the background and characters are certainly more detailed. Particularly with Robotnik and his army of SWAT bots, the latter look just as detailed as if they were live action. But Sonic Underground, being made in '99 rather than '93 like the others, looks so slick and crisp, to be fair. With a nice use of CGI, particularly with Sonic and Co's medallions, and a cool zoom in effect whenever the scene changes. As you may have guessed from what I said about it earlier, it's my least favourite and it isn't going to win. But I admit that the animation is quite impressive, so in this case it does win. Next up is the voice acting. Now I reckon this is going to be the hardest and most contentious, as all three have some quality voiceovers. Since Jaleel White offers his great voice for Sonic in all three, I'll leave Sonic himself out of this. As I said earlier, Chris Welch does a fine job of giving a cute pre-pubescent voice to Tails. And I do prefer this voice to Bradley Pierce's toddler voice in SatAM. Phil Hayes' Scratch and Gary Chalk's Grounder perfectly suit the Daft characters, not forgetting Ian James Corlette's Coconuts with his why I holler gangster voice. But the real star here is Long John Baldry's Robotnik, fantastically demented over the top, and just the voice I imagine when I think of the Dr. Robotnik character. As for SatAM, though I'm not keen on Tails' voice or his whole portrayal in that for that matter, I feel it does feature some impressive voiceovers, other than Sonic himself of course. Kath Soucie does a decent sophisticated turn as Princess Sally Alicia Acorn, though I find a princess with an American accent a bit weird, but okay. Though I do imagine her with a chavvy English accent when I'm reading British Sonic books. Christine Cavanaugh's voice for Bunny Rabbit is just a very good Texan accent, but that's it. Rob Paulson's accent for Antoine is a flawless French accent if there ever was. Rotor the Walrus, well, he's just adequate, that's it. Nicole the AI computer is also voiced by Kath Soucie, but in an electric monotone. It's pretty sexy really. As I said earlier, Jim Cummings' Robotnik in SatAM is remarkably deep and evil sounding. Pretty cool, though I prefer the Adventures of version, but definitely my second favourite. Charlie Adler's Snively is also a remarkable voice. Think Gollum from Lord of the Rings, as if he talked through his nose. I'd also like to highlight William Wyndham's voice for Uncle Chuck, who I feel gives warmth and kindness to him, despite him being fully roboticised. As for Sonic Underground, well, like I said earlier, amazingly Jaleel White not only voiced Sonic, but also his siblings Manic and Sonia. Manic sounded in a gruffer, younger brother sounding type of voice, which is okay. And Sonia, like I said, made me laugh a lot, just a super high pitched girl's voice. Gary Chalk's Robotnik is just okay, acceptably evil sounding. The voice work here that actually rivals Jaleel White comes from Maurice DeMarche, who does a good dumb lucky voice for Dingo and a remarkably sleazy and sly voice for Sleet. As I said earlier, this is a hard aspect of the shows to compare. But by sheer cast of characters with quality voices, I say that SatAM wins here, Adventures of comes in second, and Underground in third. So that's a point for SatAM and a point for Underground so far. Lastly, I'm going to compare the plots of the three cartoons. But in my opinion, Adventures of doesn't really have much of a plot or lore. We just got Sonic who found Tails abandoned, and it's just them with no other friends. There's Robotnik in his fortress on a hill and his hench robots, the SSSSS squad, and his efforts to conquer Mobius and capture Sonic and Tails, and how they consistently foil him. Apart from Robotnik having a mum who rarely appears, that's it. Though I feel that Adventures of was more about making you laugh than telling a complex story. But SatAM, I feel, has a much richer lore and story. You get all that about how Julian Robotnik and Snively are served on King Acorn, but were plotting and secretly making moves to betray him and take over Mobotropolis. Sonic and his freedom fighters, and how Sally is the King's daughter and how they go on missions to fight Robotnik. While at the same time trying to keep the location of their hideout, not whole, an absolute secret. Also, I find that despite being fully roboticized, Uncle Chuck staying in Robotropolis as a spy for the freedom fighters. And Sonic's hope to one day completely change Chuck back to normal was an emotional side plot. And as for Sonic Underground, well, it has a fair amount going on, sure. We've got Robotnik's, albeit pretty vague in its circumstances, take over Mobius, and Queen Elena's subsequent exile and fostering of her children on the voice of the Oracle of Delphius, and Sonic and his siblings growing up and learning about their mum and Robotnik and how they need to find their mum in order to form the Council of Four. But I hated the whole unexplained band concept and how their instruments ludicrously come out of their medallions. Though I guess this was a reference to how Sonic was originally going to be in a band as shown in early Sonic artwork. But as I said earlier, there's no way that Sonic Underground is going to win as far as I'm concerned. But it's okay, I suppose. And SatAM's plot is just richer and more fleshed out, if you will, so SatAM wins here too. And as I feel I've rambled on long enough, I'm going to leave it at that, so that's 1 point to Underground and 2 points to SatAM. So I feel that Sonic SatAM, or indeed simply Sonic the Hedgehog, is the best Sonic cartoon of the 90s. I've actually surprised myself here by giving Sonic Underground a point and none to Adventures of. Maybe if I went even more thorough with my comparisons, it would have gained at least 1. But nah, I think that's enough. SatAM got 2 over 1, it wins. Thanks if you made it this far, even if you skipped ahead to my conclusion. And I hope you liked the video, folks.